Hello students, today we're doing lesson 5 on add and subtract decimals, and this will be found on pages 12 through 13 in your book. So when you're adding and subtracting decimals, it's pretty much the same as you do when you're adding whole numbers. Okay, but the first thing that you need to always remember is that you need to align your same place values. So what does that mean? Well, it's the same thing as when you do whole numbers. So if I were doing 25 plus 10, I would not write it like this, 25 plus 10, right? I need to align them. So I would put the ones in the same spot and the tens in the same spot. So this is what I would not do, correct? Okay, so when we're doing decimals, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to align the same place values. So if I have 4.3, I'm sorry, let me read these in the correct way. 4 3/10 plus 2 9/10. Then when I line them up, I need to make sure that the ones, which are 4 and 2, are lined up with each other, okay? And then the tenths, which is the 0.3 and the 0.9, are lined up with each other. And then I can add. Now, when I'm adding these, I'm going to just add the same way I do. I'm going to ignore those decimals for a little bit and just add up. The important thing is that you make sure that you're lining up and keeping in the same column as the numbers above it. And the reason for doing that is because my very last part is that I bring down these decimal points and I put them in the same place that they're at. If you get messy with your numbers, your decimal point might not end up in the correct place. Okay, let's do the same problem, but let's do it with subtraction. So I'm going to line them up the same way. And I cannot take 9 away from 3, so I'm going to borrow from the 4. And now I can subtract. 13 minus 9 is 4. I can bring down that decimal point now, or I can do it later. And then 3 minus 2 is 1. So 1.4 is my answer. Okay? And that's pretty much how you add and subtract decimal points. Now let's talk about a subtraction one. Well, here, let's do this one. Let's do 15 3/10 and 12 75 hundredths. And now I want you to add and subtract these. So you could try it on your own if you want to. The subtraction might be a little bit harder. But if you want to do the addition, then you can hit pause and go ahead and do it on your own. Or just keep it rolling and go ahead and do it with me. Okay, so we're going to line these up according to place value. So when I do that, every time, it will end up that the decimals are lined up. And so that's how you know that you have them in the same place values. But if you look up here, the 5 and the 2 are in the ones place. If you line up 2 that are in the same place, then all the rest will line up also. Make sure that the decimal points are always lined up. Okay, when I'm adding, this 5 plus what is an imaginary 0 here is going to be 5. Then 3 plus 7 is 10, and I'm going to carry that 1 over here. That's 8 and 2. And then that decimal point is going to go down. So there's my answer when I'm adding them. Okay, now let's do it when we're subtracting them. So we have 15 3/10 minus 12 75 hundredths. Okay, now a lot of kids want to do this problem and just bring down the 5. And that will give you the wrong answer. So make sure that you don't do that, because I am still subtracting 5 from nothing up here, and you can't subtract 5 from nothing. So I'm going to add a 0 right here. You can always add zeros after a decimal point and after all the numbers that are after that decimal point. So that's what I did. I just added the 0 as like a placeholder. And now, since I cannot take 5 away from 0, I'm going to borrow from the 3. And now I have 10 minus 5. And you say, well, look, that Mrs. Beardsley, that it still ended up being 5. But the difference is in this line right here, where that one's going to change because I had to borrow and make that a 2. Okay, so now I cannot take 7 away from 2, so I'm going to borrow right here and turn that into 12. 12 minus 7 is 5. 4 minus 2 is 2. And I can put that decimal point there also. And then 1 minus 1 is 0, and we don't write the zeros in the front of our numbers. So we have 2 and 55 hundredths. And you know what? I did not say this one right. This one is 28 and 5 hundredths. That's how you say that one. Okay, the other thing, just one more thing on here. They're going to have you estimate some. So let's do an example of that. If I have, actually they're using this same one. Okay, so let's do this same one and let's do front end estimation. If you remember how to do that kind, it means I'm only, I'm going to rewrite these numbers down here so I could draw on them. I'm only going to round to this place. So on this one, the 5 tells me that that 1 needs to go up, and now I have 20. I'm going to leave off the decimal point because it would just look like this, right? And you don't need that 0.0. Okay, and then right here, the front end is 1, and then I look over here, and that's 2. So that's going to become 10. Now, when I estimate with front end on addition, I'm going to get 30. And if I do subtraction, I'm going to get 10. And you can kind of see if your numbers were right. So 30 is close to 28. And 10, although it's far from 2.55 or 2 and 55 hundredths, it is still what I would consider at least in the realm of possibility because of how low our numbers are. Okay, the other way that they're going to tell you to do it is round to a specific place. So now on this one, we're going to round, and this is what it will have in your book, round to the nearest whole number. So some kids don't understand what that means, and the nearest whole number just means the ones place. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite those numbers so that I can draw some on them. And if I'm rounding to the ones place, on this one, I'm going to look to the 3, and that tells me to keep it the same. Everything else is going to be 0, so I'm just not going to write that because it's point and 0 just means nothing, right? So, oops. On the next one, I'm going to underline the ones place, look to the right, and that 7 tells me to go up. So I'm going to have 13. Okay, now let's do the plus and minus. So if I plus both of these, I'm going to get 28. And if I minus both of them, I'm going to get 2. Now let's look at how close those came to my true answers. Here I have 28, and that one came out really close to it when I did rounding to the nearest whole number. And the 2 came out pretty close to it also. So I did better when I rounded to the nearest whole numbers. And that will always be true as you round closer to the last number on your page. Okay, and then we have 3 more really quick things to learn about addition, and this is true with addition and not subtraction. So these are called addition properties. And they say the first one is called a commutative property, and you will learn these in pre-algebra. You will learn these in algebra. So you're learning them today, and hopefully that will help you when you get to algebra and pre-algebra. So if I had properties are just true statements in math. So true statements in math. That's what a property is. Okay, not what an addition property is. An addition property would be true statements about addition in math. Okay, the commutative property tells me that if I have a problem like 9.4, it's the same as 4.9. So commutative property means I can switch around the order in which they are, and I still get the same answer. And so sometimes they do it with letters, so we have, which are called variables. A plus B equals B plus A. And that's just telling you that those numbers can be any numbers, right? So we could put 10 plus 3 equals 3 plus 10. All of those work. Okay, next property is called associative property. Associative property. And this one has to do with parentheses. So it's saying if I have 25 plus 33 plus 17, and the 25 and 33 are in the parentheses, then it's the same as if I move the parentheses over to those last two numbers. And you might think to yourself, why would I want to do that? Well, this problem is a lot easier to do in my head than this problem is. So it's telling you that you can switch around which ones you do first and not worry about getting it wrong. So if I had the order of operations, which we'll talk about later, not today, but later on in the class, then it does matter which one you do first. But if everything's addition, so this only works for addition, then it does not matter where your parentheses are. You can add any of the problems first. Okay? And so on your homework, you're going to have one like this. It's going to say 5 plus 6 plus 4 plus 7 plus 3. And it's going to say regroup these to make adding quicker. Well, what would make adding quicker was if I made the ones that were like 10. So 7 and 3 and 6 and 4. So to redo this one, I would have 5 by itself. And I would regroup the 6 and 4 and the 7 and 3. And now I can see very quickly that the answer to that problem is 25. But when you were looking at it this way, it's not as easily to see because you're going to say 11, 11, 3, and you have to think of them more in your head than you do when you group those tens together. Okay, so that would be your answer. If it says regroup them, the instructions say use the associative property to regroup the add-ins to make the addition quicker. So that's how you make it quicker, is by grouping the tens. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you.